What's going on, guys? Hope you're all having a great Sunday evening. It is time for a special episode of the Going Broadway Podcast. Alex and Cole with you this evening. Cole, what's happening?
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the greatest wrestling podcast ever. We sincerely appreciate you taking a moment of your time this evening to hang out with us. And I don't want to waste any time whatsoever because we have a brief amount of time with one of the greats of this business. So, Alex, if you could do us the honors of introducing our guest this evening.
Absolutely. So, first off, I can't say how cool this is for me personally. We're excited, privileged, and honored to have with us tonight a man of many talents, wrestling executive, on-screen personality, in-ring wrestler, executive producer, martial artist, podcaster, and best-selling author. His contributions to the world of professional wrestling are immeasurable, in particular being the architect behind the NWO and in WCW winning the ratings war for 83 weeks. He is the host of the namesake podcast, 83 Weeks, as well as Strictly Business. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, we welcome in the Hall of Famer, Mr. Eric Bischoff. Eric, how are you doing this evening, sir?
I am doing very well, gentlemen. Great to be here. I know we've been talking about doing this for a long time, so I'm glad the day is finally here.
Indeed. So we'll just jump right in. So we usually start off our interviews and just kind of discuss some of the more recent / notable events in the careers and in the lives of our guests. You have a new book that you've just released fairly recently called Grateful. It's had a tremendous response. People love the book. I've read it, and not being a big reader myself, I loved it as well. And I'll also preface by saying we're going to avoid talking too much about the content of the book itself because we want you guys watching to buy it, pick it up for yourself, read it for yourself. So check it out. That being said, did you anticipate the positive reaction that it's received, knowing that the content of the book and writing it took a great deal of vulnerability on your part?
Yeah, no, I'm very thrilled. I'm thrilled with the response to the book, and I'm thrilled with the book itself. You know, Guy Evans, who really wrote the book. You know, it was Guy and I together. These are my words, but Guy is the one that really edited the book. It structured it in such a way so that it flowed and made sense. But yeah, I mean, look, to sum it up. Grateful picks up where Controversy Creates Cash left off about 2006. And it really covers my career up until present day, actually. And sure, I cover TNA. I talk about that. I talk about going back to WWE, all of the things that have happened to me from a wrestling perspective since 2006. But the book is really about what I've learned and really what I've learned for the most part in the last 5 years. And to sum it up, I've learned to become grateful. I've learned to look back at my entire career, and I feel much differently about it today than I did 5 or 6 years ago. And the reason I feel differently is because of what I've learned and learning how to become grateful and disciplining myself so that every single day I'm thinking about the things I'm grateful for and changing my outlook on life. And it's really how I've evolved over the last 5 years. And there's been some interesting times. You know, I say in the book, man, I didn't hit rock bottom, but I bounced off of it a few times. I can tell you what it looks like. And part of my ability to come out of that, kind of rebuild myself one more time, reinvent myself one more time, a big part of that was my ability to be grateful for the opportunity to do it. So that's what the book's about. It's a pretty cool book, tells some great stories, and people have liked it so far. So I guess it's good.
Oh, 100%. It's very good. Like I said, I'm not a big reader. And if it's something that not only can grab my attention in itself, but, you know, as time will allow for my busy life, my busy schedule, if I can pick it up and read it in a matter of, you know, a few weeks, then whoever wrote it's done something right. So,
well, that would be Guy Evans. He did a fantastic job. And, you know, he also wrote the book, the Nitro book, you know, it has done so well. And that's how I got to know a Guy through interviewing with him for that book and subsequently reading it and becoming so impressed with not only his writing ability, but his integrity and honesty and everything about him. So yeah, I'm thrilled with it. Well, let's talk wrestling. You guys aren't here to have me pitch my book. Come on.
Oh, no. I mean, well, that all being said, we actually have a copy. If you guys want to stick around that are watching, we have a copy that we're going to do a free giveaway on a little later in the podcast. So stick around if you want to win a free copy of that. But mini spoiler about the book. One thing that I felt was very innovative were the QR codes that led to just various video supplements to each of the chapters. What made you or Guy come up with that idea? Just because, again, that's something I've never seen before.
Well, actually, it wasn't my idea. I borrowed it.
Okay.
I have a friend of mine who he's become a friend, really. He's also a writer and a professor, I think at the University of California, in biology, I believe. And his name's Brad Baluchian. And Brad wrote a book called The Wax Pack. It's a really cool story, true story, about a journey he took as a mid-20s something that was rejected by what he thought was going to be his fiance, and going through all that and some issues with his dad. And he just went on this journey, picked out a bunch of names out of a baseball pack of cards and went and interviewed those people that were big in his childhood. Cool story. He's done a similar thing with wrestling. I'm not going to give anything away. It's going to be a cool book. But in the process of getting to know Brad, him interviewing me for his research, he told me one day, he goes, I got this idea. I want to use a QR code at the end of every chapter. And I said, well, then why don't you do that with your book? And he said, well, I can't because the publisher doesn't want it, basically. He was going through a traditional publisher. We self-published, on Amazon, which is, by the way, where you can find the book. So I called Brad. I said, Brad, do you mind if I steal your idea, brother? Because it's such a good idea. Somebody should do it. And I want to do it first. If you can't do it first, I want to do it first. And I give you all the credit. And that's where that idea came from. But it's a very cool concept. And I think, not that this is going to be like, Gutenberg Bible collectible kind of category, but I think this is the very first book ever published that uses a QR code to take you to bonus content, awesome. Video content to supplement the story. So you can own a piece of publishing history. Like I said, not Gutenberg Bible history, but still history.
Indeed. Cole, I'm going to hand it off to you if you want to ask the next question.
Super excited for this, guys. We actually had the chance to meet you at the Royal Rumble event that you guys did last year before the Rumble there. And so not only are we giving away a book tonight, but we're also giving away a signed copy of Jeff Jarrett and Eric Bischoff at the end of the show here. So I wanted to throw that out there. So stick around, guys, if you want that code word to get in on that raffle. But with that being said, we're starting with more recent things. And in August of 2020 to May 2021, you make some appearances on AEW. We're going to dive into that a little bit. But first off, how did that even kind of come about? Who initiated the conversations? And were there any ever talks of you maybe long-term being a part in that initial conversations of that?
Well, I think the initial contact really came about as a result of an interview that I did with Tony Khan. I think it was on a YouTube channel or something. And Tony was one of the early things that he was doing. He was involved in a fundraiser. One of the events that he was having was also a fundraiser. And I thought it was a cool idea. So in order to help promote, I guess, I got on and did an interview with Tony and, talked about his events and all the good things there was to talk about as far as that was concerned. That was the first, time I've ever had a conversation with Tony. Shortly after that, I got a call. I don't remember who called me, but basically Chris Jericho was the one that had a creative idea and wanted to bring me in. And somebody called me and asked me if I'd be interested. And I said, sure, fly in and do that. It's always fun for me because I get backstage and see some people I haven't seen in a long time and just kind of put my foot in the water or my toe in the water, get out there and play a little bit on TV and then go home. I like that. So I did that one. And then I think a couple months later, I got another call. I think Cody Rhodes had an idea and reached out to me and I jumped in and said, sure, I'll do that. And that was it. Those are the two events that I did. And that's how they came about.
So you've been very vocal about AEW lacking in some areas. And, for what it's worth, for good reason, Cole and I absolutely agree. We've been vocal about AEW, at least in our opinion, being on the downturn of things, so to speak. That all kind of being said, packaging all that in, having not appeared in AEW for almost 2 years at this point, is the door closed on you ever making a return to AEW?
Oh, not from my perspective, but I'm sure from Tony's it might be. I would guess it would be from Tony's perspective. I know he's taken exception to some of the things I've said, and I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to hear him either if I was him. But it's look, if it happens, I'll be grateful. I'll be happy. If there's an opportunity to kind of mend the fences and jump back and stick my toe in the water a couple times a year, sure, it's always going to be fun for me. But if it doesn't happen, my life isn't going to change. I'm all good. I still get to do some things with WWE every once in a while, not as often as I would probably like. I'd like to get in there 2-3 times a year just for the fun of it. But again, same thing, man. If that never happens again, that's okay too. I'm good. I jokingly, not so jokingly, say sometimes that I am living in a lifelong dream. I live in a beautiful part of the United States, right outside of Yellowstone. We built this home in 1998. It was a dream to be able to build this home, and so I've always wanted to live out west since the time I was a little kid growing up in Detroit, and now I am. So if I never leave Wyoming again, that's okay too. I'm good with that. So it doesn't matter to me one way or the other, really.
So let's dive a little bit deeper here to this AEW thing, though. Do you think that maybe they've missed out on some opportunities of your expertise and what you could have brought to the table? Do you think they missed out on maybe some money that was on the table with you maybe being able to come in a little bit more, be a little bit more involved? Or do you think like they always felt like they were good and they didn't really need what maybe you could have had to offer to the business side of what they were doing?
Boy, that was a lot of questions all wrapped up into one question there.
Let me narrow it down to this. Obviously, knowing that you ran and know what the business needs. We could look at WCW, we could look at Impact, we could look at all these businesses where you were like, hey, I've learned the good and the bad. I kind of know what I could bring to the table to a company that has this backing financially, that has the heart of wrestling. With you being kind of brought in the way that you were, do you feel like there were opportunities that they could have capitalized on with you to help grow their business, to help take it to the level it needed to be?
Yes and no. I mean, look, do I have a wealth of experience based on a lot of amazing success and some horrific failure? Sure. And actually, I joke about that, but the truth is I actually put more value on my failures than I do on my successes, because you learn more from failures than you do successes. So between my successes and my failures, I feel like, sure, I guess I'm somebody I would want to talk to if I was thinking about, launching a wrestling company. Doesn't mean I'd necessarily agree with everything I had to say, but you want somebody that's got a little different perspective than you do when you're building something. But I think Tony, this is just an impression. I don't know that I'm right about this. I could be wrong. But I think Tony truly believes that he is uniquely qualified to be the head of creative. And Tony, I believe, has a vision based on what Tony thinks a wrestling company should be. The reason I probably wouldn't be any kind of value to someone like Tony is because I absolutely disagree with what it appears Tony's vision for AEW is based on what he's been doing for the last 3 or 4 years. It's if I'm right, and Tony is, this is going to sound derogatory and it's not meant to be, but if Tony is targeting the super indie-rific wrestling fan, and by indie-rific, I mean more interested in athleticism and crazy stuff and blood and, table matches and barbed wire fire, hand grenade matches, whatever. You know, if that's the vision, I certainly wouldn't have anything to contribute to that. You know, if Tony is marketing AEW towards the internet wrestling community, I have absolutely nothing to contribute in that area. But if Tony were to wake up one day and say, what I've been doing isn't really working the way I thought it might, and we need to do a better job in certain areas, then I think that's a point where, yeah, I could have some value, but so could a lot of other people. It's not like I'm the only one with a secret sauce. There's a lot of people out there that could help Tony. Some of them more qualified, more experienced, or higher profile than others. But there's some really, really good people out there that truly understand television, number one, because based on the formatting I see and the lack of story that I see and the lack of structure and discipline I see, Tony doesn't really know anything about television. And he knows very little about creative based on what we've seen. Sure. Is Tony a good internet wrestling booker? Sure. Keeps the internet wrestling fans excited. But if you want to build a television product on a major network, you have to learn how to tell episodic stories that are structured as a traditional episodic story, not just some wrestling angle with a couple promos sandwiched in between. That's not a story. And that's, I think, one of the problems is most of the, the AEW audience, at least the ones that interact with me on social media, what the AEW fan considers good storytelling is not good storytelling. It's not even close to a good story. And I think that's where Tony's got vulnerability right now. But if he were to shore that up, I think he's got all the opportunity in the world.
Man, I think you nailed on a head like how I feel about it so much better than I could ever explain. Because I remember, and I think what got people super excited was obviously like the next new signing that they would like hot shot on television every single time they got a new signing that was a decent, name that someone might know, and everyone gets excited, and then they go nowhere and they do nothing, and the storylines make no sense, and you got so much talent that's sitting and catering that I just think are more talented than that. And you hear through the wrestling dirt sheets, if you will, that it's because they have nothing for them.
No, they don't. I mean, there's a lot of great talent that's basically in the witness protection program. When was the last time you saw Scorpio Sky, who, by the way, is a phenomenal talent?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
And probably at the peak of his career. He's got a great look. He's good on the mic. He's great in the ring. Where is he?
Yeah, I agree.
He's literally in the wrestling version of a witness protection program. Miro, what the hell?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just weird to me. And here's what happens when you do that. You bring all those people. Number one, well, because it doesn't matter to Tony because he's not financially held accountable, right? It's his money. He can play with it however he wants. He doesn't have somebody breathing down his back for financials. So you can afford to stack up a bunch of talent and never use them, but that's very demoralizing for talent. And when talent gets demoralized, they become very dangerous to themselves and to others. Bad morale is not a good thing. And that's what happens when you have all that talent on the roster. And these people became professional wrestlers because they want to perform, not because they just want to get a paycheck and stay home. I learned it the hard way too. And I did the same thing. This is not the pot calling the kettle black. This is the pot saying, "Hey, kettle, I've done that and it sucks."
Right.
Agree.
Well, actually, Alex, just real quick, I have a little side question now because
go for it.
We're kind of on this topic. What would you say, or what would be the advice, if there is any, to the talents that kind of jumped ship, if you will, to AEW, kind of thinking the grass was greener on the other side? Obviously, now we're looking at two different pictures because we're talking about a lot of them who left during the Vince McMahon regime, if you will, of creative, and now things are different with Triple H kind of heading things up. But what would be your advice to those guys in AEW? Like, I came here because I thought this would be a better move for my career. I'm locked into a contract. What do they do? You just nailed on the head. They want to perform. They want to show their best side. How do they get out of this predicament or show that they have worth for television to Tony?
I mean, every situation is different. every contract has a different length of time on it and money attached to it, and perhaps terms and conditions that are unique. So there's no one answer, but I think it would be go to Tony and say, look, this isn't working for you. Obviously, you're just paying me to stay home. It's certainly not working for me because I'm not able to get any better. I'm not even able to stay as good. I need to work. Wrestling isn't like learning how to do any number of things. You have to do it on a pretty regular basis to stay healthy and prevent injuries. Injuries occur more often when wrestlers have too much downtime on their hand and they jump in the ring and get busy again. You've got to stay in shape. You got to stay in wrestling shape. And I'm not speaking from experience. I'm speaking from having listened to others lament and deal with this issue. It's the downtime that hurts you as much as anything else. You got to keep working, man. And just go to Tony and ask politely, professionally, and see if that gets you anywhere. If it doesn't, then maybe have an attorney reach out and ask politely and professionally. And if you can't get it done, then your next challenge is to keep a positive attitude and keep yourself ready to go, because you never know when something can happen. You never know when an injury is going to create an opportunity for you. You never know when someone's going to come up with a really good idea. And all of a sudden, from almost out of nowhere, a really good opportunity comes your way. But unless you keep yourself thinking positively, so you're mentally and emotionally ready for that opportunity, and keep yourself in shape physically, and you have to stay positive to do that. If those opportunities do come up, you won't be ready for them. Or even if you are, you won't be at the top of your game. So do the best you can, stay pro, be friendly, try to negotiate your way out. If that doesn't work, stay ready. It's about the only thing you can do.
So good.
Yeah, agreed. We mentioned at the top of the show, you also had the honor of being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. So we'll jump over to WWE. Can you tell us when you found out about the induction and who contacted you with the news?
Oh boy. It kind of came in bits and pieces. Mark Carano, I believe, was still there at the time. And Mike called, Mark Carano, not Mike, Mark Carano called me, and I think he was inquiring about my availability, but did so in a kind of a semi-cagey way. And then Bruce called me, Bruce Pritchard, and it became official for me when I was actually on Corey Graves' podcast live, and Corey is the one that extended the official in public invitation. And that's when it really sunk in, actually.
So kind of a broad question, but could you kind of walk us through like your emotions, how you're feeling as you receive the news, as well as you're giving your speech and you're kind of letting all that sink in?
I reacted kind of emotionally when Corey, broke the news, and it was live and I knew people were watching, and that's when it really sunk in, and, it was really official. But after that, I'm not plugging the book, I promise, but it's just another one of those things though. But I a sense of gratitude, really, because it's being acknowledged by your peers. What does the WWE Hall of Fame really mean? It probably means different things to different people. And to me, it's being recognized by my peers. And in this case, a couple of my peers were my competition at one point, which kind of just makes it cooler. And the thought, honestly, of being in a Hall of Fame with some of the great names that are in that Hall of Fame, I almost felt not worthy, humbled. That's the way to say that. Very, very humbled. I think it was a combination of just that sense of gratitude for being recognized by my peers and being humbled by some of the names that I'm, in there with. It was very cool. but emotionally, I was pretty steady. And the speech was just my heart. I mean, I had to actually put it on paper because they had to time it, and the production truck needed to know, and so I did put it on paper. But really, it took me 20 minutes to write that speech because first thing I did is I recorded it. I just sat down and talked like I was doing it live, and I had a dictation app on my computer, so it just put down everything I wrote, and I went back and cleaned it up, moved a few things around. That was it.
Wow.
Love it. So we're going to transition a little bit here. I know we have a limited amount of time with you, and there's just so much we could talk about. But Cole, this transitions quite well into what we want to talk about next. Cole, why don't we jump to early 90s WCW?
Yeah, so obviously we're coming out of AWA, going under, and kind of just want to kick it off with who and how were you brought into WCW? How did that all kind of transpire?
Yeah, well, I was in Minneapolis. I had an agent. My wife was a model, and I had been a model and did some commercial television acting and spokesperson type stuff. So I had an agent technically, and I think somebody told me, and I don't know if it was Larry Zbyszko or somehow I heard that WCW was looking for announcers. So I put together a demo reel, is what they call them, just a series of clips of different things I had done in television. Keep in mind, I'd been on ESPN Monday through Friday for about a year and a half. So I had that ESPN footage in there, which gave me a little shot of credibility. And I added in some other things that I had done on camera, both commercial, television commercials and other things. And I sent it off to Jim Herd. Or I produced that demo tape. I gave it to my agent, and my agent sent it to Jim Herd at WCW.
Got you. So within a couple of years, Bill Watts resigns, and you would take his role as the executive producer for WCW. In your opinion, was there anything in particular that gave you maybe the edge to obtain that role versus maybe someone else who might have been pursuing that position, like a Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone?
The truth is, I was woefully unqualified for that job. If you were to look at my resume, there is no reason anybody should have hired me for that job. However, Bill Shaw, who was then vice president of human resources at Turner Broadcasting, reported directly to Ted, is the one that conducted the interview process. And I think the reason Bill gave me the nod was because I wasn't a traditional wrestling guy. They'd already tried that with Bill Watts and others who came before me. I was not that. I thought out of the box. I thought about television first and wrestling second. And I think through the interview process, Bill saw something different in me, probably more creative, a little bit, I want to say thinking out of the box, but yeah, that too. And I think that's what Bill was most interested at that particular time, but it certainly wasn't because of my credibility or my credentials.
So soon after you were promoted to executive vice president of WCW, you would convince executives at Turner to invest more financially into WCW to start competing with the WWF at the time. Of course, you landed Hulk Hogan famously as well. So had you not become executive VP, how do you think the future of WCW may have looked? Do you think Turner would have inevitably put more money into WCW?
No. When Bill Shaw came, when Bill Watts was let go, within a day or two, Bill Shaw called a meeting for all the WCW employees in the office and came down and said, look, here's the situation. Either this company turns a profit in very short order, or Ted Turner is going to pull the plug. That's it. The Bill Watts debacle was so bad because it wasn't just the company, not making a profit. That was bad enough. But some of the things that Bill Watts did that really had a negative effect on Turner Broadcasting as a whole. I'm not going to go into it. People probably know the story. He said some really stupid things, racially insensitive, stupid things in the interview that made its way back to Ted Turner through Hank Aaron, of all people. So there was a certain level of frustration, and well, not a certain level. There was a gun to our head. It was either turn the company around or Ted's going to pull the plug. I don't know that anybody else could have. I don't know that anybody else would have done the things that I did to turn WCW around. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. And if they hadn't, WCW wouldn't have lasted as long as it did.
So, little piggyback question. Do you think Hogan comes if you're not in charge, if you're not doing the things that you're doing?
That's such a hypothetical. Depends who was in that spot. And by the way, the first thing that I did when I took over WCW was cut costs, reduce the bleeding, and there was hemorrhages everywhere. Our travel expense was 2.5 or 3 times higher than it should have been because of fraud.
Wow.
It's sloppiness, right? Guys who would get 3 or 4 tickets for the same trip, use one, save the others, and use them for fun, right? There was so much of that going on. I moved the production to Disney MGM Studios because traveling the show, even around the Southeast, to produce it in arenas was too expensive, and the crowds looked like crap. Taking it down to Disney, actually, because of the economies of scale, saved us money in the long run. And that's the reason that Ted Turner was more willing, once Hulk Hogan became available in '94, because I had spent the last 1.5 or 2 years cutting costs and stopping the bleeding and demonstrating fiscal responsibility. Which is why when the opportunity came along for Hulk Hogan, Ted was willing to spend a lot of money that wasn't originally in our budget. And because we made that work and other things started happening, I didn't have to convince WCW to spend more money or Turner Broadcasting to spend more money. They were willing to spend more money based on the amount of success that I had been having over the previous year or 2 years. I had to earn that right. I didn't just talk somebody into it.
Right. That's good.
So because you've already talked extensively about the NWO on 83 Weeks, as well as in your other book, Controversy Creates Cash, and since a lot of our viewer questions will likely be centric to NWO, we're going to actually start wrapping up our WCW portion of this discussion and talk about someone who is actually an indirect reason why you're on the podcast with us tonight, Barry Windham. And by the way, thoughts and prayers continue for Barry. I know he's still dealing with some health issues, but from what I hear, he's going to recover. So Eric, what can you share with us about Barry Windham, the performer, the person himself, and what interactions you may have had with him in WCW?
Barry Windham was very close to Dusty Rhodes. And when I first got to WCW, Dusty kind of took me under his wing a little bit. I drove to all of the TV tapings. I rode with Dusty and Doug Dillinger and Janie Angle and myself. So I spent a lot of time with Dusty, and Dusty spent a lot of time with me. And I think to try to help me get comfortable in WCW, to try to get to know me a little bit, to see what potential I had. And we just got along. We both liked to hunt. We both liked country music. We both liked a lot of the same thing. Dusty loved horses. I loved horses. Dusty and Dustin both came out and hunted with my wife and I here in Wyoming one year. Before I got promoted to anything, I was just a C-squad announcer. So Dusty and I ended up becoming friends, as well as me basically working for Dusty. That's how I got to know Barry, through Dusty, because Dusty was also around Barry a lot, and Barry was in the office quite a bit. So got to know him that way. My sense of Barry still is super professional. I mean, first of all, very, very talented guy, very believable for a big man. And he is a big man. He was able to move. He could move like a 180 pounder. Mm-hmm. Some guy that was, 5'10", 180. He could move that quickly, right? For a big guy. He had a great look. There was just about everything you could want out of a performer at that point in time. Barry had it in spades. Believable, great look, credibility, great repertoire in the ring. Could have different styles of matches with different people, and tough as nails. but more than anything, just a super pro, just easy. And when I say easy, not that doesn't mean that they just go along with anything, but if there were issues, man, you just talk through them, creative issues. If you didn't quite understand something or agree with something, you just talk through that. And I love that in a performer, and especially somebody at Barry's level. Nothing but respect for him.
So sort of a piggyback question. Do you think if Ric Flair wasn't in the picture, again, just a hypothetical, if Ric Flair wasn't in the picture during, late 80s, do you think Barry is in that spot as world champion?
Could have been. I'm not really good on hypotheticals. I find them hard to really focus on too much because there's so many variables,
Sure.
so many variables. So it's hard to say. Is he qualified? Would he have been qualified to? Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's fair.
So jump in ahead a little and we'll conclude the WCW discussion. Would you be able to share with us just how close maybe you were to buying WCW and what the vision you had for it moving forward had that purchase went through?
Well, the vision for it would have been to rebuild it, to find some cost efficiencies. We had already started talking to the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. They were thinking about building about a 35 or 4,500 seat venue that would have been perfect for television and concerts. And we were negotiating to be an anchor tenant, meaning we would have kept our stuff there, our cameras, our rings, everything. Staging would have all been right there on location. And we would have shot all of our shows out of Las Vegas, at least for a while. But that's, it was more, how close did we come? Very damn close. In fact, the letter of intent had been signed. We had done a conference call for Turner Broadcasting announcing the fact that we were buying. It was a public, it was investor conference call, right? So we went public, Turner went public. So yeah, we came real close, probably within weeks or months.
Wow.
That's just crazy to me. I mean, somebody that myself that was watching both brands at the time, just so many hypotheticals in the world of wrestling, what could have been, what may have been. So it's just fun to think and talk about that kind of thing. So what I like to do for the next few minutes is something we've actually not done on any of our interviews before. So what we want to do is throw out some names, and
Sure.
you literally just tell us the first thought that pops in your head, whether it's positive, negative, somewhere in the middle. Can be a brief response, can be long-winded, whatever you'd like. So the first name I'm going to throw out is Vince Russo.
Oh, Vince Russo. I don't even know how. I'm kind of neutral. I don't hate Vince. Vince Russo is a likable person. He really is very charismatic, and there's a lot of reason to like Vince Russo. I don't trust Vince Russo. Vince Russo has demonstrated to me on more than one occasion that he's not trustworthy. And when it comes to non-trustworthy people, I don't like them or dislike them. I just avoid them. They don't exist to me. So that's why I guess I don't really have much to say about him. He really doesn't exist to me.
That's fair. The next name I'm going to throw out is Jason Hervey.
Great guy, super talented, charisma for miles, smart. He was a great business partner.
Let's skip over a name or two here. How about Sting?
Wow. Sting. Talk about another guy I have a ton of respect for. Rare. He's got a lot of very rare qualities. Super talented, very introspective, super pro. He's got a lot of qualities that combined make him a very rare individual.
I like it. Scott Hall.
Wow. Scott Hall, one of the most talented creatively talented people I've ever met.
Vern Gagne.
Wow. He's one of the pillars. When I say pillars, I mean one of the pillars that have helped build and contribute to the platform that we all watch on television every week, whether it's WWE or AEW, because a lot of great talent that was responsible in part for the growth of professional wrestling throughout the 80s, which is what made Ted Turner interested in having it in the 90s, late 80s and 90s, to AEW having the opportunity that it has right now on a Turner Broadcast Network. All of that was supported to some degree by some of the great talent that Vern Gagne produced and nurtured and developed, including Hulk Hogan, including Ric Flair, by the way. Where do you think Ric Flair started?
Yep.
Hulk Hogan didn't start in Minneapolis, but he really made a name for himself in Minneapolis. He learned, and Hulk Hogan will tell you this, Terry Bollea will tell you this about Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan learned to become Hulk Hogan because of Vern Gagne, not because of Vince McMahon, because of Vern Gagne. Vince McMahon Sr. and then Jr. gave Hulk Hogan a much larger platform to go on to become amazingly successful, more successful than he obviously ever was in AWA. But Vern Gagne taught Hulk Hogan how to be Hulk Hogan. And when you just look at a guy like Vern Gagne and all of the names, Kurt Hennig, just so many names that went on to become major, major contributors to the industry, they all came through Vern Gagne.
Great answer. Another AWA alum, Diamond Dallas Page.
Just a great friend. The most giving person, the most generous person, one of the most generous people I've ever met. And DDP's generosity comes in the form of his desire to help and the extent to which he'll go to help other people. Really help. Yeah, never met anybody quite like him. Great friend.
How about Bruce Prichard?
One of the toughest people I have ever met.
Dennis Rodman.
Misunderstood. People don't realize this about Dennis, but he's a very, very smart guy. You know, they read the headlines, and Dennis is eccentric. There's no doubt about it, man. This guy wore a wedding dress to a book signing. Come on. Yeah, he's eccentric as hell. He's also smart. He's really smart. And I really, really enjoyed the time I spent with Dennis because, like everybody else, I only knew that Dennis Rodman. I only thought I knew the Dennis Rodman that I saw in the media. But when you sit down and you just have a conversation with him, you realize he's a very sensitive guy. He's actually quite shy. And I think the way he deals with his shyness or dealt with it is by being this over-the-top eccentric character. But the real Dennis Rodman that I got to know was a little bit shy, slightly introverted, but really smart and understands more of the world than I think most of the world understands themselves.
Interesting. Ron Simmons.
Class. Just pure class. I love seeing Ron. I see him about 3 or 4 times a year, different conventions or events. We end up doing the same thing. And I always go over to say hi because every time I do, he makes me laugh. And not because he's the funniest guy in the world, but he's got one of those laughs that if you're within earshot of Ron Simmons laughing, you're going to start laughing and you're not even going to know why. He's just that infectious. He's one of those guys. He just makes you feel good about being in whatever room he's in.
I love contagious personalities. I'll throw out a couple that will actually be our guests over the next few weeks. Your co-host of Strictly Business, John Alba.
I like working with John. You know, John is a completely different, he's a much different person than I am, We grew up differently. We're obviously different generations. We probably look at the world generally quite differently, he's a good contrast. You know, he's a super pro. You know, he really is a pro on camera. But he's passionate about what he does, which I really appreciate. He provides a pretty good contrast to me. You know, it wouldn't make sense for me to do a show with somebody who's kind of just like me, right? Nobody wants that. But John and I can get into a debate, and we can take two different perspectives on the same issue, and we can talk it through and beat it up. And sometimes we can get animated about it, but it's always in fun and it's always productive. And I really appreciate that about John.
Buff Bagwell.
The best is yet to come.
I love it. I'll throw out two more names, and I'll just kind of randomly pick from the list I've got here. How about Randy Savage?
He's just one of those guys. And when I say one of those guys, he's one of those guys that will always define professional wrestling in the minds of anybody that's been watching wrestling for more than 20 years. He's just one of those guys. That voice, that look, and those matches and the stories and the mega powers. And it's just, he was such an important part of history that I think Randy will always be associated with what really should be considered the real heyday of professional wrestling, when Vince McMahon took the company, or took the product national, increased the production values of the show, took it nationwide, you know, basically you've crushed the territory system in the process, but became this national wrestling promotion. That really was a major move for the wrestling industry, and Randy Savage was a part of it, just like Hulk Hogan was, man. And Vince, obviously.
Well, and that transitions perfectly into my last name, Vince McMahon.
Oh, wow. A very complicated individual. Vince is brilliant. His mind operates on a much different level than the average person. He has his flaws. Trust me, we all know that. But you talk about a visionary. You talk about a guy who had a vision and was willing to do whatever it took to execute on that vision. It's mind-boggling to me what he built. It is still, to this day, if I think about it too much, it becomes almost hard to conceive how he did it. It's not that he just built a business. He built a wrestling business. Vince overcame the stigma that had been associated with professional wrestling, just like it was with roller derby. And the fact that most people in the media business, all the way through the 80s, really, looked at professional wrestling the same way they look at Pornhub. You know, they kind of categorized wrestling as just a little bit more sophisticated than porn. And he completely changed that, where now the media industry looks at professional wrestling, and WWE in particular, as one of the most viable forms of entertainment in the genre. Right? You look at what WWE has become. You look at the stability that WWE has enjoyed throughout the COVID, everything else, their stock prices. I mean, the business of the wrestling business has never been as big or as healthy as it is today. And that's because of one man, that being Vince McMahon. You can dislike him. You can despise him for what you read in the paper. But let me tell you this about Vince McMahon. I sat in his office and I promised him I would never repeat the story. So I'm not going to give you the who and the what and the why. But I sat in his office and watched him. If I was ever concerned as to whether or not there was any compassion in Vince McMahon, it all evaporated one night about 1 o'clock in the morning when he got a call and I happened to be in his office, and I couldn't help but overhear his side of the conversation. Let me just say, when that was done, I looked at him and said, "This is one of the most amazing things I would have ever expected to happen, and I'll never mention it." So he is a compassionate guy. He's done things for people that none of us know about.
Mhm.
I know of a few things that he's done for other people that has never made it public. He's a compassionate guy, but he's also an amazingly driven personality who has no room for people who are not as driven and committed as he is. That makes him a little tough to work with. Let me tell you.
I know
Well,
that's a great answer. I mean, anybody who, just as an example, if you've watched the Andre documentary, for those of you that are watching us, if you've not watched the Andre documentary, on HBO, Bill Simmons produced that. Just a great watch, but you know, there are facets of Vince McMahon's relationship with Andre, and I know it's been on podcasts as well about, you know, Vince essentially paying for the coffin that had to bring Andre home despite their strained relationship. And that's just one example. So, yeah, I mean, whatever the situation or story was, you know, at least me personally, doesn't shock me. I mean, I've seen Vince be, not personally, obviously, but you know, if you've watched any of these productions, you know, you can tell that Vince has some vulnerability, and you know, so nonetheless, great story. So Cole, why don't you
yeah.
take it over?
Well, guys, just so you guys know, we're going to take probably the last like 5 minutes to get to our viewer questions. And as a reminder to you guys, we go with our Patreon members first. So we'll get to their questions. And if there's time, we'll grab a few from the chat.
You guys, I'll tell you what, if you could do me a favor, if you can keep everybody busy for a minute, I'm going to get a little bit more water, use the restroom, and you could extend the time 15, 20 minutes, whatever. I don't care. All right.
Oh,
okay.
Awesome.
Sure.
All right, guys. So here's what we'll do, actually. Alex, let's go ahead and do one of these giveaways while he's out. So, guys, if you want to.
Well, I figured we were going to combine them.
Oh, okay. Let's combine.
So one person would just win everything.
Let's do that then. And let's just go ahead and make the word Bischoff. All right.
Well, hold on. It's got to be spelled right. So how about we do Eric?
Let's do Eric. Okay, we'll make it Eric. E-R-I-C, y'all. The word is E-R-I-C. Throw that in the comments, and we'll do our little raffle generator there for that. And again, guys, once you've done that, you can also drop your questions in the chat for Eric, and we'll try to get to a handful of them, as well as with our Patreon members. Also, while he's gone, we'll just take a quick minute to run through a couple of our announcements, if you will. So next week, I believe we have John Alba with us, our normal time. So join us next week on Sunday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time with John Alba. The following week, we have, is it Buff Bagwell?
It is Buff Bagwell.
Buff Bagwell. And are we special time on him or regular time?
Regular time, 7 p.m. Central.
So 2 Sundays from now, Buff Bagwell, 7 p.m. Central on that Sunday. And then I think we switch up from there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep. So B. Brian Blair will be with us the following week, but it falls on a Monday. So that would be the 27th, I believe. And he will be at a special time, I believe, 5:30 Central, 6:30 Eastern. It's on our social media platform, so check out Going Broadway Podcast on our Facebook page, Twitter page as well, for that updated info. And then we'll have Jake Roberts, special guest, on a Monday episode as well. Jake Roberts joining us on April the 10th. That'll be at a special time at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central.
Awesome. So let's real quick get to this drawing, and then we'll get to your guys' questions for Eric, and I'll also have him share all of his details of how you can find all of his stuff. So Alex, if you want to give us.
Yep, I'll do the 10 clicks. Here. So here we go. This is for the book written by Eric called Grateful. It is a brand new copy, as well as the signed 8x10, I believe.
Yeah,
I think it's the size of Eric Bischoff and Jeff Jarrett that came from the Hall of Fame show in 2022, just prior to the Royal Rumble in St. Louis. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Click number 10. The winner is Jordan Fager. Congratulations, Jordan. We'll get that book and that signed photo sent out this upcoming week.
Awesome. So, Eric, thank you for extending the time, first and foremost, and for just being on with us. This is a huge honor. Absolutely love what you've done in your career. And so we just want to take give you a few moments, if you will, before we jump into the questions, to tell everybody where they can find you on social media, your books, anything that you'd like to promote. This is your time.
Well, 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. That podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. So just look for it. 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Also, we do a podcast called Strictly Business, and it's on the same feed as 83 Weeks. So if you go to 83 Weeks, wherever you get your podcast, subscribe, you'll be notified whenever Strictly Business, and it usually drops on a Thursday. 83 Weeks drops on Monday. Strictly Business generally drops on Thursday. Or you can go to YouTube, Strictly Business with Eric Bischoff. Again, follow us on YouTube, and then also ask for notifications, and you'll get it there. Beyond that, Grateful, the book is available at Amazon. I don't really have the link off the top of my head, but just go to Amazon Books, Eric Bischoff, Grateful, and I'm sure you'll find it. It's available on Kindle. We have autographed books that are available now. If you go to guyevansbooks.com, you can get autographed copies of the book there. And you can follow me on social media at eBischoff on Twitter and the real Eric Bischoff on Instagram.
Awesome.
Love it. All right. So our first question comes from, again, our first few questions are our Patreon members. And real quick, just to plug that, if you want to be part of our Patreon, you would get first dibs on questions being submitted to our guests. You can join at patreon.com/GoingBroadwayPodcast for as little as $5 per month. First question comes from Stacy Hernacki. She asks, if you could do WCW again, what would you change, if anything, and why?
Well, that's a loaded question. I changed a lot of things because now I have the benefit of 2020 hindsight, and we'd be here all night and into tomorrow and probably Wednesday going through all the things that I could do differently with 2020 hindsight. I probably would have, one of the things I could have done, it ultimately wouldn't have changed anything, to be honest, but I think I could have done a much better job interfacing with senior management, meaning, for the most part, from 93 till about the middle of 98, nobody bothered me. I didn't have anybody from TBS breathing down my back, wanting to know why I was doing what I was doing, how I was doing what I was doing. They just left me alone to do it. It's a tremendous amount of freedom, unusual amount of freedom, really. But as much as I enjoyed that, it allowed me to not develop my ability to learn how to manage up, meaning manage myself, but manage the people above me and do a better job of managing up. I didn't do that. And I didn't want to do it either. That was a bad thing. But we could talk all night about that. Can't go into that much detail on a show like this.
Right.
Sure. Next question is from Andrew Boehner. He asks, what was your biggest takeaway from your time in the AWA?
Make it believable. Keep it real. Keep it as real as it can be. Obviously, it's not real. It's scripted. But allowing, and I learned this as an announcer, the more I believed in what I was watching, the more I allowed myself to believe what I what I was seeing as I was calling it was real, the more genuine it came across to the viewer. And that's an art, it's an art. And I learned that from Vern Gagne, really. And Mike Shields and Larry Zbyszko and a few other people along the way.
Thomas Russell asks a couple of questions. First one, he asks, looking back now, do you think pushing other guys, now this is a hypothetical, do you think that pushing other guys like Eddie, Jericho, Mysterio, etc., for the heavyweight title may have helped WCW last longer?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
He also asks, with what you know now, again, benefit of 2020, benefit of hindsight, what would you change with the way, with what you, now this is kind of a broad question as well, but I'm just going to ask it how he asked it, with what you did with the NWO as far as the members, the split, etc.
Yeah, again, that's such a broad question. It would be too hard to do a great job answering it. So I'm just going to boil it down to the very basics.
Sure.
I would have kept the story simpler longer.
I love it. Okay. Let's see. This comes from Jordan, who just won our drawing. He asks, what was it like getting choke slammed by Kane off the stage?
That was a ride. It's a very cool ride. I don't know. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, so I just dug it. It didn't hurt, although I did break my thumb when I landed, and that was my fault because because I'm not a pro. I didn't practice it. Didn't want to practice it. I figured if I'm going to get hurt, I don't want to get hurt in practice. I'd rather just get hurt doing it.
Right.
Yeah, Kane took me up, and when he choke slammed me off the stage, I made the rookie mistake of kind of reaching down to anticipate the ground. But of course, I reached down too soon, and when I finally hit it, I ended up breaking my thumb. And I didn't even know it till the next morning when I got up to come home. My thumb was the size of my fist.
Wow.
But other than that, it was fun. It was fun. I liked it.
Let's see. This is a good question. It comes from David Tilley. He asked, what were your favorite and least favorite venues?
My favorite was the Cow Palace. My least favorite. Oh, I don't know that I had a least favorite, because every venue, when things were going good, every venue we went to was a nice venue. It really was about which town that I wanted to go to, who had the best food, where were the best restaurants. But I love the Cow Palace because there was so much history there. Every time I go there, I go, man, if these walls could talk, if this venue could tell you stories, there's so much great, everything came through there, just a cool building. I liked Chicago, I like working in Chicago because the food was great.
Sure.
Denver was also a town that I liked working in.
All right. So piggyback question for me. This is something I noticed as I did a little bit of research. While you were with WCW, at least in the office, so to speak, I noticed that there was only one. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I noticed there was only one time that WCW came through St. Louis for a pay-per-view. Any logic to that? Thought process? Just a fluke?
No, I don't know what I didn't book the buildings. Gary Juster did, and later Zane Bresloff came in, and he a lot of that went to Zane Bresloff. I couldn't tell you what the rationale was. I wasn't involved in that part of the business, so I couldn't tell you. And I do know that one time that we did go there, I think we set a record that may still stand, which is kind of cool. But I couldn't tell you why we didn't go there more often. It's a great wrestling town. We should have.
Agreed. Chris Robinson asks, are you still in the production business with Jason Hervey? And if so, any upcoming projects you can speak about?
No, Jason and I kind of went our separate ways. We're still friends. We still chat every once in a while. But we both decided around 2015 that the direction that television, the industry was going, wasn't good for small production companies like ours. We were too big to survive in the environment that we were competing in. We were too small to be acquired. So we were in this weird position. Like if we had been a bigger company, more staff, more shows coming through the doors, we probably would have been bought out by somebody else, a bigger studio, right? Because a lot of small independent production companies like ours, that was happening, but they were much bigger than us. They were like twice as big as us. So the good thing about Jason and I is we were small enough, we could be nimble. We could scale up as quickly as we needed to, or scale down as quickly as we needed to adjust to market conditions and the amount of volume we were producing at any one time. Because to successfully sell a television series, to create one out of your head, you start out with a piece of paper and a pencil, but to go from that process to actually producing a television show for a network, you've got to have about 20 television show ideas in development at all time in order to keep one or two shows in the pipeline. So the business is very cyclical. It was for us because we weren't a really big studio, but we could scale up or scale down as needed. So we made a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But around 2014, 2015, the handwriting was on the wall. And we said, wow, we're not big enough to be acquired, and we're too big to survive in this environment. So we decided just to shut it down. It wasn't fun anymore. Producing television used to be really fun. Creating television and selling it in the marketplace used to be a blast. Now it's like banking or going to do your taxes. It's just not any fun anymore. And I've always been the kind of person, as long as I'm having fun doing something, I don't worry about how much money I'm making, because if I'm having fun and I'm really into it, I'm going to make money. It's not an issue. Never has been. Never will be. But if I'm not having fun, it doesn't matter how much money I'm making.
Yep.
I'm just miserable and I don't want to do it anymore. And the longer I'm forced to do something I don't really enjoy doing, the more I start to resent it. And that never bodes well.
So I want to obviously respect your time. So I'm going to take like 3 or 4 from the chat currently real quick, and we'll ask those, and then we'll wrap up here with you. Brian Griffin asks, has technology ruined the magic of wrestling? Nothing special happens at house shows anymore, so why go?
Has technology ruined wrestling? No, I think technology has made wrestling better. Now, there's aspects of technology that I think are kind of negative. Social media can be just a cesspool of miserable people, and you can't allow those people. You can't take them seriously. You can't take trolls and troll-like comments seriously. I've seen a couple here pop up, by the way. It's kind of funny. But I think the fact that people have the ability to exchange ideas and to communicate, and, there's a lot of good on social media. A lot of good things come out of it. You just have to be mature enough to kind of separate the good from the bad. But I think social media as a whole, look, the more people are talking about something, the more successful something's going to be. If nobody's talking about you, you're probably going to go away, right? So I think as negative as social media can be sometimes, the positive is there's more people engaged right this minute. There are more people engaged in social media talking about wrestling than there probably would have ever been 15 years ago. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Right.
I think the ability, the evolution of streaming and how technology has made it possible now for small independent promoters to actually produce a live show and get distribution for example, on a network like Fight TV. How can that possibly be a bad thing? That's a great thing.
Yeah.
It's allowing more people into the marketplace. It's allowing 2 or 3 or a couple, local independent promoters that nobody's ever heard of to put on a good show and let the world see it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All those things are good things. And I don't think they've ruined wrestling. I think look, you're never going to ruin wrestling, right?
Right.
And wrestling is very subjective. Just because I don't like the approach of AEW doesn't mean there's not 1 million people on the average, 900,000 people probably on average that really enjoy it.
Sure.
So God bless them.
Right.
The fact that there's so much more available is interesting because I think it's wow. Somebody's calling me on Skype and she looks like a hooker. Wow. Every once in a while you get these, I guess they're just people that call random numbers on Skype and they're usually creepy. But I don't think, if anything's ruined wrestling, I think the sheer look in WWE, and that's not a good example because WWE is doing a phenomenal job right now in storytelling. Up until this year, they haven't.
Right.
The stories have been very undisciplined, very thin, not very compelling. They didn't progress very well. There was a lot of weakness in WWE storytelling up until about 6 months ago or a year ago. Now they're knocking it out of the park. AEW, on the other hand, doesn't have any storytelling. They have what they consider storytelling, but it's not compelling. There's no discipline. There's no structure. It's really not a story. It's a wrestling angle with interviews. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's hurting the business, in my opinion. Now, WWE's making up a lot for it. I think the Bloodline storyline is the best storyline that's been told in professional wrestling, period.
Amen.
Period. Better than the NWO, better than Sting Hogan, the Crow Sting storyline. Forget about the ending. That was a mess. But the storyline leading up to that was pretty damn good. Bloodline's much better. It's more disciplined, better structured. More characters have evolved out of it in a compelling way that gets more interesting every week. That's called episodic television. That's what wrestling needs. That's what WWE is doing, and that's what AEW needs to do in order to have us another Monday Night War type revival.
Right.
Wrestling was at a peak then because the storytelling was fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's what it needs.
So another question here. 2024 rolls around. Is there a place for MJF in WWE in your opinion?
Sure. He's a very talented dude. Very talented. Unquestionably. I'd be surprised if he doesn't end up there.
Yeah, same here.
Last one from the comments here, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Yep.
Your thoughts on CM Punk?
I don't have any respect for him. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because I never met the guy. We've never had a conversation. We've never shook hands, nothing, right? So I didn't have an opinion of him. I respected him as a performer and obviously achieved a lot in WWE, had some great success, but he wasn't on my radar. When CM Punk was at his peak in WWE, I just wasn't watching WWE. It has nothing to do with CM Punk. It's just wrestling wasn't interesting to me at that point in time. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he made his debut, when it came to AEW. But when he came out and the first thing he did was go for the cheap heat, one of the first things he did by burying Hulk Hogan. It's like, wait a minute, dude, you've never met Hulk Hogan. You've never worked with Hulk Hogan. You certainly don't know Hulk Hogan, and you haven't accomplished a fraction of what Hulk Hogan has accomplished. So why are you burying him? And the reason he did is because the dirt sheet internet universe, which is essentially the bulk of the AEW audience, Punk knew he'd get a good reaction with that because that's the internet narrative, right? And when a talent has to go to the low-hanging cheap heat fruit right out of the chute, that tells me he doesn't really have anything. He exposed himself to me at that point. He exposed what he didn't have at that point. And then he went on to say some other like really stupid stuff, like him and Bryan Danielson and Moxley coming to AEW is a bigger deal than Scott Hall and Kevin Nash in WCW. Are you kidding me? Are you what if you're not smoking crack because you're all that straight edge stuff? What exactly are you doing?
Right.
Because that was the dumbest thing I've ever heard anybody say. So between those two things, it indicated to me that this guy ain't all he's cracked up to be. He was in the right place at the right time with the right promo, and everybody thought he walked on water. And I think he's a really average talent.
Yeah. I've been saying that. I'm going to wrap it up with this last question. Could you highlight 2 or 3 people that you see in the business right now that you think should be kind of elevated to the next main event slot or kind of the next person up, if you will?
Well, let's see. Right off the bat, let's flip a coin. Jey Uso or Sami Zayn?
Man, I've been saying Sami Zayn since before anybody else. Everyone else saying tag, and that sounds like where they're headed. But tag team, whatever. I've been saying Sami Zayn needs to be the one from day one of this storyline because it's been organic, and that's what I absolutely love. But Jey Uso, it's a great one too because it's organically getting there too. So,
and I'd like to look. I don't think MJF is. He's only going to fly as high as the ceiling in AEW lets him fly. Meaning, there's a certain talent pool at MJF's level currently in AEW, and he's going to get through that. He's going to get through those talents over the next year or so, year and a half. And the audience is what the audience is. It's not growing. And unless something changes in AEW relating to storytelling and structure and discipline and creative, because the creative sucks, that's all there is. And if you love it, great. But I think the only metric that we can have to measure anything by in terms of popularity on television is the ratings.
Right.
And their ratings are flat. They're deteriorating slowly but surely. And when I say flat, meaning they're just not growing.
Right.
And in the television industry, you're either growing or you're slowly dying.
Yep.
So unless that changes, nothing in AEW is going to change. And MJF probably won't grow much beyond where he's at right now. He's the hottest heel in AEW. What else is he going to do to get any hotter in AEW?
Yeah.
Chances are he won't.
Right.
But if he can keep his heat and stay sharp and stay motivated if he makes a transition to WWE, that's going to be a fun one to watch.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Well, thank you so much for just everything tonight. It's been awesome. It's been super exciting to chat. I'm humbled to be able to even have a conversation with you. So thank you so much.
No, thank you guys. And thanks again for helping out with Barry Windham and doing what you do, man. Wrestling is, like I said earlier, the more people are talking about it, the more there's, guys like you that are putting together great podcasts and have great guests, not including myself in that, but you're going to have Jake Roberts and Brian Blair, and you're going to have some interesting people that have a great story to tell and a perspective. So thank you guys for what you do. It's good for the business.
Indeed. Well, we don't want to keep you. I know you mentioned Mrs. B's got some dinner for you, so we'll let you go, and thank you once again. We appreciate it.
All right, guys, be well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, how cool was that?
So much fun. So much fun. And what's crazy is we scratched maybe like this much skin on like what we could literally talk about, go deep dive in. We're not just talking about his career. We literally could dissect the business. This is one of the few guests where I really feel like you and I could just dissect the business. WWE, AEW, Impact, NWA. Like we could literally go down the company list and just be like, what do we think of this? What are your thoughts on this? What would you do? And like, it would just be entertainment gold.
Yeah. And I'd really love to have him on again in the future. And just saw Jordan's comment. I mean, there could be a Eric Bischoff part 30. I mean, my goodness, there's just so much we could talk about. But we are going to wrap it up. And like we said, we got John Alba on next week, Marcus Bagwell on the week after that. Those will be at our normal times, Sunday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. And then going past that, going beyond that, I think the date for B. Brian Blair is going to be Monday the 27th. I have to look up the exact time because I don't remember.
I think it's 5 p.m. I think it's 5 p.m. Central Standard.
Well, I think when I rescheduled with him, I think I picked like 6:30 or 6:30 Eastern. Because I get off work at 4:30, and I think I wanted to give myself enough time to get that queued up and whatnot. And then 2 weeks after that, we've got Jake Roberts on Monday, April 10th. And that's going to be at a special time as well, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. And again, you can check out all of our social platforms for info on that. But Cole, it is about that time. Any final thoughts?
Guys, as always, thank you for watching the greatest wrestling podcast ever. To answer Cartoon Network, I am the greatest of all time at everything and anything, and that is that. But guys, just a quick reminder, we do have our gaming PPV going on right now. So if you could go to our Facebook page, go buy you some slots. I think we have like 8 left total.
7 or 8, something like that.
So we're almost there. As soon as we get that filled up, I can actually tell you what the match types are going to be. I can get the graphics out there. We can do this big, and I'm super excited for that. So go get you a slot. If you aren't familiar with that, what we do is you can purchase a slot. It's all CPU generated matches, and the winner of each match gets entered into a drawing for a belt or a cash out prize, whichever one you would like to do. So go do that. If you would like first dibs, though, on your wrestler and your match, you can become a Patreon member with us for as cheap as $5 a month. That gives you early access to all of those pay-per-views. We do one a month. It gives you the ability to ask your questions to all of the guests that we have coming up, as well as other perks and things that go on that are great. So make sure that you go do that. Also, make sure that you go hit that subscribe button on Twitch to help avoid the ads. So when we do these pay-per-views or when we do these interviews, you don't get any ads. You don't miss out on any of the fun.
Or our watch parties.
Or our watch parties that we'll do. And that way you can always be involved and don't have to miss anything with the ads. And you help support the show by doing that as well. So I wanted to bring those things up. And last but not least, if you want to be involved in the best wrestling community that's out there, one that encourages, one that has fun, and one that loves to talk wrestling in any form or fashion, hit us up on any of our platforms. We'd be happy to give you the link to our Discord. We would love to have you.
I'm going to post that in our chat thread right now for anyone that might want to.
There you go.
Might want to join. So give me just a second. I got to pull this up here.
So he's going to drop that in the comments. So hit that link, join our Discord, come chat it up with us. We have a great time in there, and it's just a lot of fun. We talk about anything and everything. So make sure that you hit that link that is in the chat right now.
And if you're not familiar with Discord, it is free. It's not like it's anything paid or whatever. We talk
about everything and anything in there. And if you're going to do the gaming pay-per-view, we also have a list of all the downloadable characters that we have: AEW, NWA, Impact, Legends, different people that we've downloaded that you can also utilize for the gaming tournaments as well. So make sure that you go hit that link. I think I covered everything. So with that being said, again, one more time, congrats to Jordan. Your prize will be sent out to you, but make sure you shoot us a message so we can get all those details together and make sure we get it to you. So with that being said, I leave you with your favorite thing in the entire world.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Come back next week with John Alba, and we'll see you then.